we used to take insulin. This is how it was back in the maybe 80s, even 90s. We used to take the insulin before we were planning to eat. So then you had to eat. So I have a pump, or in fact, it's a pod, the Omnipod.
Nice.
So you prove to all type 1 diabetics that you can have optimal blood glucose, blood sugar control without wearing a pump, with just the classic injections, and the CGM is all you need, and the keto lifestyle to manage your blood sugar as well, don't you? So tell us about how you manage it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah,
so injections.
When I started this, I made sure that my basal levels were right. So I had a period of fasting. I did a 24-hour fast, so I'm fairly good at fasting, whereas others may want to just miss breakfast and just monitor the effect of their long-acting insulin, whatever it is, Levemir or Lantus or Tresiba or whatever, and then skip the lunch and evening meal the next day and monitor the blood glucose. And if it's fairly flat, that means your basal level's about right. If it's going up or down, you'll need to adjust your basal to get a smooth enough profile. There'll always be a little bit of a spike, probably in the mornings for a lot of people. But if you're fasting, that then determines the amount of basal insulin that you need, the amount of insulin required to cover your background production of glucose by your body, mostly due to adrenaline and cortisol. And of course, the body needs to make its own sugar. You don't need to eat to make sugar so that you can provide certain areas of the brain with glucose, and also the red blood cells, which have to use glucose for energy. So once the profile's set, and I think it's always good practice to split your dose of long-acting 50-50, sort of 12 hours apart. The reason I say that is because you're putting smaller volumes in. So you're less likely to make errors, that's all. So if you've got, say, 8 units, which I use 8 units in the morning, 8 units at night, if you put that in at 8 and 8 and you happen to get into a scar tissue or something, you'll rescue the situation later on in the day. So it's just much easier. And then it's just literally counting your carbohydrates and injecting the insulin according to your ratio. So if you've got, say, insulin carb ratio of 1 to 10, which is typically used to start with, yes, you'll count your carb levels down to about 30 grams a day, and most people on a normal nice guideline diet will have about 300 grams a day, so 10 times more. Say you have 3 meals a day, or I have 2, but it's irrelevant, and so you split that up into equal amounts of carbs. So you're having 10 grams of carbs for your breakfast, say 10 grams for lunch, plus your fat and protein, and then you'll just use 1 unit of insulin for those 10 grams. If you're on 10 times as much, you'll need 10 times more insulin. And of course, that then starts to increasing errors, because it's just more difficult to manage 10 units of insulin as 1 unit of insulin. Your potential to drop your blood glucose is huge. So if you think that 1 unit of insulin drops your blood glucose by about 2 to 3, a little bit more in children, probably drops it 4 to 5. So if you just have 1 unit and it will drop your blood glucose by 2 units, even if you're 6, it'll only take it down to 4. Whereas if you have 10 units of insulin, it will drop it by 20 to 30 millimoles per litre of glucose. And of course, that's why you eat your carbohydrates to catch that up. But if you forget to eat your carbs, if they come late, your plummeting of glucose is precipitous, and that's why it's more difficult to control your diabetes with high levels of insulin and carbohydrates. The only other way I manage is to allow for protein. Protein does produce protein in excess, and will produce glucose, or the body will break down protein to make glucose if it needs it. So protein tends to cause a late onset effect of rise in blood glucose. So carbs, typically you'll get a rise half an hour to an hour, and with protein it'll go up 2 to 4 hours or something like that. So you have to anticipate a late rise of glucose due to the protein.
And if protein is combined with fat, which it often is,
yes,
it could have a late effect of, I don't know, 6. I mean, with me, it's quite often 6 hours later having a spike after my meal. 6 hours later, even if the meal contains no carbohydrate, I will need insulin just for the protein and fat. But not instantly, not immediately after eating or before eating. No, 6 hours later.